prices in heating oil.
Kelsey Norman, it's one thing to analyze the economic impact of any war. It's quite another to consider the humanitarian consequences. What do you see as that humanitarian impact so far, and where we might be headed if this is sustained for longer term?
Sure. So I focus primarily in my research on migration and refugees. So anyone concerned with that space has been watching this internal displacement, mass internal displacement unfold in Iran so far. So last week, the UN was saying 3 million have been displaced within the country. As this week drags on, it'll probably escalate to more like 4 million. And predominantly people have just been staying in Iran, but looking for safer places within the country. So trying to escape Tehran, trying to escape other cities that have been subject to these airstrikes. As a conflict continues, we typically see people look for safer havens across international borders. That's when we would start to wonder about refugees. So far, we haven't seen a lot of people leaving Iran. If the numbers have been something like 1,500 crossing to Turkey each day, for example, and to other countries neighboring Iran. But it's certainly something that those concerned with the humanitarian impacts have been watching. There's also a second segment of this displacement unfolding in Lebanon as a sort of, a slightly removed but still very impacted segment of this war. So after the former supreme leader was killed by Israeli and U.S. strikes, Hezbollah retaliated into Israel, striking them across their border, and as a result, Israel has unleashed this aerial campaign over Lebanon in the south, in the east, and also striking Beirut. And more than 1 million people have been displaced inside Lebanon as well, with some people also fleeing, for example, to Syria, in kind of this reversal of displacement. So there's really just sort of horrifying levels of displacement going on over the past few weeks throughout the Middle East. And if this war continues, we might expect to see the number of refugees, not just internally displaced, but people crossing international borders, also rise. So that's something that many around the world are concerned with.
Of course, this program, we focus a lot on what this all means for Houston and Texas. And bringing it back to Houston, I would think the most immediate, obvious connection to what you're talking about is that there are Iranian Americans here, there are Lebanese Americans here, there are people with family and friends and international work colleagues who get swept up in this. And I would imagine many of them are already facing the more daunting task of trying to figure out, well, where is this person? Where are they now? And how are they? And I imagine that's the kind of thing that would just increase over time.
Yeah, communications within Iran have been terrible for months now, but especially with the onset of this new conflict, people have a hard time understanding where family members are. There's not reliable internet or ways of informing family members where everyone is and if they're safe. So that's one aspect. And then secondarily, when we see displacement in previous conflicts, there's, when people are displaced, as we've been talking about for conflicts that drag on for years, for example, sometimes refugees become eligible for what's called refugee resettlement, whereby people who get to neighboring countries like Turkey, in this example, with Iran, if they end up staying there for a period of time, they might eventually be able to come to the U.S. And that's part of what's made Houston so diverse as it is refugees have come here from all over the world and been able to reestablish their lives and contribute to our communities. If this conflict drags on, though, refugee resettlement is not going to be available to Iranians because the refugee resettlement program has been effectively gutted under this current administration. And even for those who, might want to look for other ways to get family members, for example, here to Houston, we have something like 10 to 15,000 Iranians living in Houston. So they're thinking about their family members, wondering how they can help them. But unfortunately, Iran has been on a list of visas, both immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas, that are banned since December of last year. So even that option is not really available. So for the moment, getting people, physically to safety in the U.S. is unfortunately not an option.
Does a humanitarian crisis have other ripple effects? Other countries, say, take in refugees, even if our resettlement program isn't active. could that then lead to others moving out of those countries to still others, and eventually someone comes to our shores, and kind of the where people are kind of gets jumbled up?
Right. I mean, it's not inconceivable. I'm assisting with an asylum case at the moment for an Iranian prior to the start of the current conflict who came all the way from Iran to Venezuela and then worked his way up, attempting to seek safety in the U.S., passing through all those countries en route. So it's not impossible, but you can imagine that Europe is looking much more closely at this current conflict and wondering if they're going to see something like what happened in 2015 with large numbers of Syrians arriving. For the moment, it's not really in the cards. As I said, most people are just staying within Iran or within Lebanon. But as people would maybe make their way to a country like Turkey, Europe, of course, becomes more concerned. And Turkey is taking preparations to either establish a buffer zone if large numbers of Iranians do try to come to the country, or maybe allowing certain groups of individuals to enter. But it's reluctant to host refugees. Again, it already hosts over 3 million Syrians as a result of that conflict, which dragged on for years and years. And even as the situation changed in Syria, people have not necessarily gone home. So Turkey doesn't want to host large numbers of Iranians, but if it does allow some people to occupy maybe the border region, seeking safety, then it would probably look towards Europe to help aid in that regard, because Europe has an interest in keeping people within the Middle East region rather than receiving them in Europe.
Dietrich, back to the economics, and again, still with ripple effects here. As we watch gas prices rise, most of us, we immediately look at whatever kind of gas we're filling up our cars with. But trucks use diesel, and the diesel gas prices have really launched upwards. That's all of the stuff that gets shipped everywhere across the U.S. So we're talking about basically just about every kind of good, not every, but most, that we buy at stores. At what point do we start to see an impact in terms of the prices we're paying for all sorts of products just because it requires more expensive than normal diesel to get them from points A to B?
You're already seeing it. You just maybe not noticeable because it's pennies rather than dollars on certain products, and it's worse than you just described.
Okay.
So it's diesel is the most immediate one. You think the semi rigs on the highway that you are watching like deliver stuff to the Amazon warehouse, that you were going to order. That you're correct. That stuff, the shipping costs of taking a container ship anywhere in the world have gone up because now we've basically reshuffled the entire shipping structure of the universe away from the Middle East. But the downstream impacts of all, like even the it's not just the diesel, think of all the byproducts that come out of a barrel of oil. So massive amounts of the world's fertilizer supply depends on Middle East oil production, especially in Asia. And so food prices start to creep up, not just because they're expensive to transport, and a lot of food that's brought in that you might buy, certainly kind of more exotic things that you buy at the grocery store often get shipped by airplane. And so we know that our jet fuel prices are just gone ridiculous. But then the price of growing it has gone up. The fertilizer goes up. All sorts of byproducts that go into industrial production go up. So now there will be the longer this goes on, a much more sustained increase in general prices because of the ripple effects that this has. This is why energy shocks are always pretty negative for the economy, because it does tend to ripple out, and there's not a lot of options quickly to substitute away and use something else.
Let me throw out this last question to both of you, which is from your respective perspectives here. What should we have learned from Iraq and Afghanistan in particular, but really other longer-term conflicts that the U.S. has found itself involved in particular in the Middle East, but really anywhere at any time? Are there lessons that we should have learned, and do you feel confident that they have been learned? Kelsey?
I would say that this feels oddly reminiscent of the early 2000s. I think we haven't gone into this war with a clear game plan or mission, and so that would probably be the lesson we should have learned from Iraq and Afghanistan. Those conflicts did not end satisfactorily, I would say, from either the U.S. perspective or the countries themselves perspective. And from a displacement standpoint, there's still millions of Afghan refugees. There's still millions internally displaced in Iraq, and we can expect, if this conflict does drag on, we don't know what's going to happen yet, but if it does, that there will be millions of Iranian refugees, and that we shouldn't expect that if they do end up in displacement situations, that they'll necessarily go back to Iran quickly, because that hasn't happened in other contexts, and especially if things like civilian infrastructure, energy, all of that is destroyed in the course of this war. And I think, unfortunately, this displacement is happening at a particularly terrible time, as Dietrich was just talking about. The economic impact is felt within the aid sector as well. Humanitarian aid is going to be extremely costly as food production and shipping costs go up. And it's also coming at a time when the aid sector globally has been slashed as a result of the end of USAID, which was the biggest contributor to global aid. So unfortunately, this conflict and this displacement is happening at a much worse time than the early 2000s.
Dietrich? I mean, I think that, yes, we had really, I think, clear lessons from prior conflict in the Middle East, and really just from prior history in the Middle East going back to the 70s. We know that these energy shocks have ripple effects that are almost incomprehensible because of the thick networks of trade and production around the world. And those networks are just so much more deep than they were even 20 years ago, that you should have known that this was going to happen. And it seems inconceivable that you wouldn't have anticipated this. So to the extent that it was anticipated and it's felt like, well, that's the cost of kind of doing this kind of business. Okay, but it would be kind of inexcusable to say you didn't appreciate that this would be the consequence.
I'll leave the last comment to Brandon watching us on YouTube. He writes, the intricacies of any action are complex, the reactions numerous yet mostly predictable. Kelsey Norman is a fellow for the Middle East and director of the Women's Rights, Human Rights, and Refugees program at the Baker Institute.
Well, folks, talk radio continues. My last stop is at Kroger. They got some oxtails on sale. So I've got to go in here, run and get my oxtails and get back to the house and put the oxtails in my crock pot. Well, I'm making oxtail stew today. And then that was talk radio. And they're talking about Iran war and us. They're talking about how the refugee problem is going to go to the roof. And then they're talking about also in Houston, they're talking about how the largest propane distributor right here in the Houston area shut down because they're having mechanical problems. And propane is used a whole lot in the whole U.S. So the biggest propane producer, they call it a form of liquid gas. Actually, liquid gas has shut down in the Houston area, the largest producer. So, a lot of that propane is exported throughout the country. So propane could go up, or they said it could actually go down for a little while, and then maybe it could go up until they get the problem resolved from the large mechanical problem they're having at this very large propane producer here in the Houston area. And they're talking about gas prices. Oil's going way up, way up, way up. As you can see, talking about diesel prices. And I'm going to show you, I'm in the Kroger's parking lot, and they have a gas station. You get a discount if you buy gas from Kroger, if you remember. But I'm going to show you how much, this is in the Houston area, how much they're charging now for fuel, for liquid gas and diesel gas. And I'm going to show you the price tag over here for what I'm going to zoom in here real quick. For unleaded, it's $3.45. Mid-grade is $3.85. And premium, I guess it's $4.25. I don't know if that's diesel or what, but it's in green, so it might be diesel, or it might just be premium gas. says premium. So that's probably super unleaded. So those are the prices here that they're charging in the Houston area, which is up a whole lot, because I know before this Iran war conflict, gas was at like 2 something a gallon. Now it's way up. It's way up. So they're saying it's up by 90 cents per gallon now, which is crazy. Crude oil per barrel is selling, I think, at 110 gallons per barrel. Crazy. But anyway, I'm going to get in here and get my oxtails while they're on sale and get back to the house as I run my last errands for this morning. And remember, man, we are in the real world. You know, it is what it is, people. You have to be prepared for what's going on. So, you know, and everything. You have to make yourself, take yourself outside the loop. Is what I'm doing. I'm taking myself outside the loop. I'm getting more self-sufficient. And like I said, I had not bought a gallon of gas in 3 years. So, I drive an EV. So it doesn't affect me at all. So it's all about taking yourself outside of the loop, taking yourself outside of just being a consumer, and then to have the choice to be more self-efficient. So that's what I've done. Y'all have a nice Monday, and get outside, grow your food. It's springtime, so plant your seeds, grow your fruit trees, do your aquaponics, do your hydroponics, however you want to do it. There's so many ways to grow food. Y'all have a nice Monday. And remember, ain't nobody coming to save us.